Hi everyone, my name's Mick Gilgunn. I've lived in Islington 21 years. I've lived in Tollerton Ward 9 years, and I was in the private rented sector, and it's something I feel strong about. I'm now in a housing cooperative with secure housing in Tollerton, so I'm very pleased to represent Tollerton, and if the choice comes my way on July the 1st. I've been involved in, as far as Islington's concerned, in Defend the Whittington Hospital Coalition. I've been involved in the Axe the Housing campaign, which is the legislation, you know, that the Tory party had on housing, and been involved in against the campaign to sell off the Holloway, well, the Holloway development as we know, but the prison officers flats, which looks like probably be going to the private rented sector. I've been, for the last 15 years, I've been involved in Islington Trade Union Council, which is the TUC basically, and it's the umbrella movement of local unions actively. I've been a Labour Party activist since I was in my early 20s. I started off in Westminster, in Pimlico, campaigning against the notorious Homes for Votes designated sales policy as I knew it, but media, it became national headlines. And that's where I started, and I've been campaigning ever since. So I'm an activist, and I'm key on the ground in Tollerton. This is a learning curve as well, and I've never taken for granted that it's always a learning curve. So here I am, and hopefully all being well, might be a candidate as I am, maybe a councillor next week, we'll see. But I want to work with my fellow councillors to make Islington a better place, which it is. That's all I want to say for an opening. I don't know how long.
You have a couple of minutes to tell us why we need to vote for you. I think that's how it works. And
I'm a grassrooted person. I know what it's like to go through patches. I mean, sort of the casework that you come across. I lived in the private renters, like I said before. I've been unemployed at times. I've gone through casualisation. I've worked right throughout London in the construction, mainly the maintenance side of the industry, the construction industry. And I work at London University doing the maintenance on the campuses. And of course, students are having a lot of problems, as you know. In September, we hope they come back. And if they don't, we might be facing a restructure and redundancies. I've represented workers in the past as a union rep, a small group of workers. I'm involved in the community, and I'll always campaign on people's behalf. And it'll be an honour to represent the people of Tollerton Ward and be part of Islington Council. And yeah, I'll say, if you vote for me, I'll always stick by you.
Thank you, Mick. That was very good. Thank you very much. Now, I turn now to the next candidate, Jane from the Liberal Democrats, who's next alphabetically, I think. Jane.
Yes, thank you. You'll see perhaps under my image a different name, Jane Hibbert. That is actually my maiden name, and the Nicolov bit is my husband's name, so we joined the two together, but I'm usually known as Jane Nicolov I'm known as Jane Hibbert at work and Jane Hibbert privately. Anyway, yes, I've lived in Tollington since 1986, and I've seen a lot of changes in the area. Obviously lived it day by day, being a working mother with children going to the local nursery school and so on. My career actually started in industry, and when I realized that I wasn't going to get promotion very much as a woman in industry, I retrained as a teacher, and I've been a teacher for the last 20 years. I've taught in Islington schools, and I'm now at Skinner's, which is also, at least in the postcode area, and just up the road. When we first moved to Islington, to Tollington, we first lived in Hanley Road, and then moved here to Tollington Park. One of the first things I did when I moved to Tollington Park was join the Conservation Committee in the council, and found that I was one of the only 2 participants from the north part of the borough in this committee. And we did our very best to speak up for the north, but found that actually, as has been a pattern until recently, the north of the borough has been rather neglected, and other parts have been perhaps spoken up or had more influence, I don't know. So that's made me always feel that I should speak for this part of London, because in of this part of the Islington, should I say, because I feel other voices have been much louder, and the voices of people around here haven't been heard. I've more recently been very active in the Tollington Park traffic group, because one of the things that we've noticed over the last year, I should say, is the terrible increase in traffic, which has really started to affect the well-being of the local residents. It's threatening our safety, it's threatening even the fabric of the buildings we live in. So for a year now, I've been quite active, gathering information. When we had the map where we put all the different pins on there, making comments, all the local residents, I brought them all together and put them into one document, which was sent to the council. The other thing that, of course, being involved in conservation has been the trees. One of the important features, I would say, about this part of Islington is that some streets are well endowed with trees, others not. And I've been quite active in trying to at least preserve the very large and beautiful trees in our own streets, and have written to the council on several occasions to have tree preservation orders put on some of the more beautiful specimens, and not forgetting that, of course, trees, when they grow, absorb carbon, they help with biodiversity, they fight against pollution. So I would say that I have committed quite a lot of my time, even as a working mother, to trying to make Tollington a good place to live in. And if you vote for me, that's obviously what I'll be working for into the future, to make Tollington better, a really fantastic place to live. And I will speak for people's views, and I will make sure their voices are heard.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you. I turn to our next candidate, Jonathan Ward, who I think is hiding in here somewhere. Yes,
I am here, yes. Thank you, Johnny. First of all, I really wanted to say thank you for organising this hustings. It's really good that we get a chance to talk to the people we're asking to vote for us. I think that's hugely important. And I think that's going to be a theme, really, of my candidacy. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm a building engineer and a sustainability consultant, and I've lived in Islington for 19 years and in Tollington Ward for 19 years. And I'm really a properly local person. I really feel like Tollington is my home, and I'm a committed member of this community. And I've got I think quite a strong track record in serving the local community in various activities. I suppose the most obvious of these is been a governor at St Mark's School for 15 years, and that's been a really great pleasure to have that role. I've really helped get a lot of projects off the ground there. Over that 15-year period, we've done a huge amount of transformation of the school playgrounds. I think people will have seen that from the early years centre and the football pitch and all the planting in the playground, the canopies, the play equipment for the kids. And I've been a very just quite a key member of that team. I've been really lucky to have other great governors with me on that, and obviously the school funding, we've pulled in funding from the council, but that's been over £1 million worth of funding that we've actually brought into the school and improvements, and it's hugely important for the kids there. 70% of the kids at St Mark's School have no outdoor space at home, so we've really sought to give them a good environment, and also it's incredibly important for the kids. The early years centre can now provide school places down to 2-year-olds, and that's really important for kids that are in need and very disadvantaged, and it's a really great start in life for them. I've also been a member of the Friends of Wray Crescent, not your current version of it. I don't want to sort of but the previous version, when we ran festivals for 4 years on the trot, we had about 1,000 people coming to the festival. Again, I was part of a little small core team that did that, but I think we're very proud to do that. We're very proud to bring the community out in all its diversity into the park, help people to own the park. I think that was the real reason for the festival happening, was people felt like it wasn't really a very safe place for them, and all different aspects of the community, the kids from the schools, the faith groups, other groups came, and we really celebrated and enjoyed having the park. I've also been, for the last year and a half or so, a very committed and a member of Community Plan for Holloway, which is the community organisation which is campaigning for a good redevelopment of the Holloway prison site, and we've been pushing hard to increase the amount of social housing that we delivered on the site. There's going to be 2,500 people living there. We're pushing hard for the designs to be environmentally responsible and also good places for people to live in Holloway, and that's going to create a great new environment, but it's important that it's done well, and we're seeking a good legacy of the prison and a women's building, women's centre that can continue to serve women in their needs in the borough.
I have to rush you a little now.
Okay, so I just want to say that I will listen to and fully represent the views of Tollington Ward. I think it's also really important to say that I'll bring better balance to decision making on the council. Currently, it's a very single-sided. The conversations are very dominated by one party, by Labour, and if you vote Green, if you vote for me, then the reality is the way the votes are going to work, you've got the biggest chance of having an alternative voice on the council rather than just having all Labour councillors. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much for coming to see us tonight and telling us how you can sort of help us, really. I mean, here we are in Tollington. It's not perhaps the easiest ward in the country to live in. It has huge wealth inequality and lots of different challenges here. But let's ask a question. We'll have a national question. And I think today everybody's burning on one question and one question only, and that is, should Matt Hancock resign? Now, we'll start with Mick.
Yes, I think he should resign. He's made a number of blunders. I think with the pandemic, I think one issue that the government have really missed is the connections between the NHS, local authorities and universities. Universities in the research of medicine, the NHS, as we know, and local authorities, because local authorities are key to this, getting out of the pandemic. And I just think the whole thing has been a hash. Hancock himself has made a number of blunders, and I think that the question basically is, yes, he should resign. But who would take his place? I mean, I know some years ago, when we had the Health and Social Care Act, this led to the part privatisation of the health service. When I say part privatisation, we've got Santeen at the moment, which Ange, is my fellow councillor, is working on in Hanley Road. Because Santeen have taken over about 50 medical centres in London. And this is the sort of private, that was the blueprint, Langley. So I think who would replace him? But until we get rid of this Tory government, I really think we just have to continue to protest and have our surgeries and keep our NHS and keep fighting for it. I just think Hancock, it'll just be another replacement, and it'll be the same agenda, covertly driving private outside sourcing of our parts of our NHS, cherry picking. So the question is, yes, I'd like to see his resignation, but it'll be someone else replacing him with just the kind of private agenda that they hold. And I just think we need someone more accountable, and we need to expose what's going on in our GP practices here in North London.
Thank you, Mick. Jane.
Yes, I actually agree with Mick. I think he's quite right to be so concerned about the covert privatisation of, starting with GP surgeries, all sorts of other services on the NHS. The surprising thing is, perhaps not surprising, is that he hasn't resigned already. It's not that should he resign, he should have resigned a long time ago. The point also is that maybe he's been asked to stay on because, in fact, it's not necessarily him driving what is going on. His boss, Boris Johnson, could have sacked him at any point, especially after the revelations of Mr. Cummings, and has chosen not to. Therefore, he must be an extremely useful person to the government. The real anxiety, as Mick has expressed, is what will actually happen to the NHS overall. The privatisation of data, for instance, is something that we maybe should be concerned about, and that people should be thinking twice about whether they should allow the NHS to hand over their data to Google and anybody else who cares to consult it and make money from it. The other concern is, of course, who is actually going to run the NHS? And I'm sure Mr. Hancock has got it pretty well sorted, that the person of their choice will run the NHS. So yes, I certainly think he should resign, but I don't think he's going to, which is concerning.
Thank you, Jane. Jonathan.
Yeah, I think I just want to support those comments that have been made, really. I just think it's incredibly disappointing to see how the government have manipulated this situation they've been in, the sort of sense of emergency. They've taken advantage of it. The cronyism, the way they've handed out contracts to their mates, to their contacts. I think it's really disgusting. And there's the sense that there's almost no shame in the government in doing these things. It is a big problem. And of course, Matt Hancock should resign. There's others. The Barnard Castle stuff, that was terrible, and just we need to just do what we can to call that out. The Good Law Project is a great example of how they've actually been crowdsourcing fundraising to bring legal cases against the government, and he should resign.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks, very great. We've got a local question now, and I'm a bit torn, but I think I'm going to ask this one. How does your party involve the local community in decisions that affect them? I'll start with Mick.
Well, the local Labour Party, the Islington North Labour Party, and then you've got the South and Borough-wide, have scrutiny committees. Particularly various committees are all scrutinised. So that's an opportunity for the local committee. So for local activists or local people concerned on different issues, it might be traffic, it might be the HGV vehicles. I noticed has come up on the Tollerton Park, very, very concerned to Wray Crescent itself. Maybe issues to do with Wray Crescent, what we're here for tonight. It could be all different issues. There's various scrutiny committees that you can scrutinise the councillors. I feel that the local Labour Party, as such, campaigned. I was part of this actually, very much against the Clerkenwell fire station being shut down, and the local party of post offices as well. We've had a number of post offices locally here on Holloway Road, notably, and the one in Finsbury Park being shut down. That was also a campaigning issue. So we're out there all the time campaigning, and you know, on various issues, and we're always open to sort of feedback from the local community, and we're just sort of continuously campaigning. Housing obviously is a real concern, and I think the council have made some inroads there. Specifically, what I feel deeply about is fair rents for the private rented sector. Islington Council have been building council homes, and I hope that continues. And some of that pressure comes from below, from activists within the Labour Party itself. So that's how we can campaign. I always think that the Labour Party always wants to hear from the local community, and we get that on the doorstep. We're out campaigning continuously. I'm learning a lot as I go along on the last month, and which has pretty drained me really, but I'm beginning to find a bit of casework on the doorstep, and some of that are social issues that, you know, we can embrace, overcrowding being one of them, and how we solve that, how we go about it's a big issue. And you know, there's no, and crime being another one. I think all the candidates here would have faced that on the doorstep.
Last 5 seconds, Mick.
Well, that's it basically in a nutshell.
Thank you. Thank you, Mick.
Yeah.
The same question for Jane. How does your party involve the local community in decisions that affect them?
Yes. One of the characteristics of local actions or local, how should I say, protest recently has been the lack of consultation by the council, that bring new projects in pretty much developed and then expecting that the consultation only lead to various tweaks and so on. And what we would suggest would be citizens' assemblies, which take on some of the characteristics of this evening, but it's quite formal and gives the opportunity for the different cases to be put and for people to express their views, and it's all conducted according to very formal rules. And I think that this would be a first actually for Tollington to bring people together, for instance, on issues of traffic, or should somebody set up a similar arrangement as we have for the traffic group about crime. We certainly could think of something like that for Wray Crescent. I know that you've got several petitions going, which of course is an expression of the popular voice. But I think perhaps a citizens' assembly on the subject of Wray Crescent would perhaps have the force of a formal response to the given situation as we face it at the moment with Wray Crescent. So that's the way I would suggest that we could go ahead and bring in as many people as possible into a very formal consultation, which is not controlled by the council, which is not just a letter chucked through your letterbox and maybe given attention or not. I would love to see one tried actually, so perhaps I'll have the chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. And finally, Jonathan, how does your party involve the local community in decisions that affect them?
Yeah, I mean, the Green Party is full of activists, people who care, who get involved. I think you'd be finding Green people in across the board in local issues campaigning. I know that they were very involved in the Nocado campaign and still are. In community plan for Holloway, they're very well represented. And also it comes down to, I think, personal actions as well. Something that I've done on a personal level is got very involved in planning applications and given scrutiny to those, because with the best will in the world, not every issue is well scrutinised at a council planning situation. And IAMS were going to basically going to shift a whole load of the playground over to a car park, and we got very involved in quite a long, protracted planning conversation with them, and so they actually went back and changed their plans, and now they've only got a smaller car park where you see it now in the school. I think the challenge for engagement is that the scrutiny committees are hugely kind of bureaucratic and are really tucked away in the council workings, very hard to access and engage with, very formal. There's a mechanism for neighbourhood forums, which is a council provision. We've seen, I think, 4 meetings in about the last 5 years, and they are really very much still quite council-run meetings. And I would propose that engagement method is used, but much more frequently. Sometimes they're kind of community days where it's just kind of bouncy castles and stuff like that. I don't think that's necessarily the way people want to engage. I mean, it's not too bad to have that, but it's important to have these slightly more formal meetings, as Jane was mentioning, where people can bring up and debate and have good conversations about local stuff happening around them.
Thank you, Jonathan. And now we're moving to some, well, you know, we're the Friends of Wray Crescent, and we do hold the park. It's quite important to us. We use it a lot. And so the first question, I think you all know, but the Friends of Wray Crescent have worked hard since inception in the second or perhaps even third generation of it. And certainly we've worked hard all through the pandemic to try to make the park a safe and welcoming space for the entire local community. We've put in a lot of time and a lot of imagination, a great deal of effort to do so. We speak to everyone, and our work played a big part in winning a Green Flag Award for the park based on our community engagement and conservation work. And yet, when we attempt to tell the powers that be that they're making a poor decision, they reject our advice. If elected, how will you ensure the people of Tollington are properly heard? Mick.
Well, I'll take it. I mean, this is all geared to the consultation, and
it could be anything.
Anything, but it's specifically the debate in the last week or so in the local press, and I believe in this week's press, highlighting Wray Crescent. I looked at first of all, I looked at Wray Crescent's website, and it's got the consultation on it, and because when I read the article last week, I had to read it again because I didn't think really that it's been up for consultation since 2018, which I believe Wray Crescent were invited and been a part of that consultation, and since the pavilion, I believe the consultation closes on the 15th of July, which is a few weeks' time. And the council have got funding from London Marathon Trust, Sports England, England and Wales Cricket Board. And part of that funding is community based, it's for schools, it's for youth training. I believe the pavilion is going to have an office there for free coaches, free cricket coaches, and they're not going to be based there all the time. It's just that they use it as a base. The proposals on the community to use the facilities for community facilities, I think has been taken into consideration, and open space for community activities, which was Wray Crescent's, I believe, demands. And I think it's important that that's spelled out, because it's important that Wray Crescent community is part of that. I don't think it's a point of being isolated. I think, you know, I'm not trying to stick up for the council wholly if I thought they were wrong, but I do think it's, they wouldn't fund this if it wasn't for community use, if it wasn't for youth facilities, and particularly schools. I think there's a whole history of Wray Crescent being used. I mean, the whole history of it. There's always been a cricket pavilion there since the early 70s, or since the 70s, and it needed modernising, and they brought in these partners. And I don't think it's, I don't think it's true that Middlesex Cricket Club would use it for their own team practicing in Wray Crescent. They're using it for youth facilities and coaching and training. And I think as long as it values the local community, as long as it values youth sports, and I think as long as there's community involvement in the pavilion, that space is used, I think it's a good initiative, and it's an initiative to go forward.
Well, Mick, thank you. I have to, well, that was three minutes. So we'll move on now, I think, to Jane. I would say, I think I have to say, because you did say that you sort of called out a couple of things which you mentioned you thought felt wrong in terms of the consultation. In 2018, we did go for a meeting, and we have been trying to explain to people at the council at every level that the plans that they had in mind would not work and were not effective for the area, but we've not been heard. And that's just what happened. But I don't want to get into too much a discussion about that, because you said what you said in good faith, and I felt that perhaps you weren't fully understanding of that. Jane.
Could you just remind me of the question, actually? You're muted. Jonathan?
It's a long question, so perhaps I'll make it very short.
Yes, go on.
When we attempt to tell the powers that be that they are making a poor decision, they reject our advice. If elected, how you ensure the people of Tollington are properly heard?
Right, of course, the difference between talking to the council on this side, as it were, and being within the organisation, of course, will give you access to people that, for instance, you, Johnny, might have wanted to have had, but you haven't been able to have because you are not in the council. The councillor has access to the people who actually make decisions. One of the disturbing features I found recently about the discussion on Wray Crescent was the comment that the booking of the facilities would be exactly the same as they always have been. That is to say, within the council, there is a system of booking which is just going to continue. If I were to be on the council, that would be one of the first things I would visit. That maybe it should no longer be booking in exactly the same way as the past. That is to say, any afternoon after 1:30, after 5:30, and any weekend after 1:30 on either Saturday or Sunday. That is to say, 7 days a week. It is building the new pavilion, investing a lot of money into it, calling it a centre of excellence, making sure that it is not going to be just for training young people. It will be a place to attract a lot of teams, perhaps from even outside Islington. And there will be greater demand on that booking scheme. So one of the first things I would do is to make sure that the division of time is equitable. That is to say, you could have Monday, Wednesday, Friday for cricket, and one day at the weekend. I mean, that would be one way of doing it. There must be ways that we can limit who can book what when. As I say, it's not like a tennis court, which has only one purpose. Therefore, people have to have access to it. And the system of booking has to reflect that. Not that anybody could book it at any time they want. So that would be one concrete thing that I would do. The consultation, obviously, we're talking about what would you do if you were to be in the council. I would want to know also, were there any special interests? Is this project being pushed by people with particular interests? Are there people pushing this project who are members of the MCC? I would be very interested to know how access was made to the MCC. And I think that things will be possible only when you are inside the system, that are not possible however much you protest, however much you are consulted, however many petitions are raised. There comes a point where there has to be will within the council to make changes, and you can only make that change if you're in there. So I think
Thank you, Jane.
Time.
Jonathan.
Thanks, Johnny. So I just need to be clear, this is not a consultation of the community on the design of the building. It's just not. It's simply, is explained very clearly to us more than once, it was a consultation on the management plan. So the building has been designed and we are now being asked how the community would like to use it. There's been no consultation with the schools. I've spoken to the schools. They've had no conversation. So there's been no question about quite how the schools might want to use this space, how they would get over there. We've got 3 primary schools and a secondary school, all within easy walking distance, a huge, huge potential resource for the local community. There's been no consultation with the leadership, the management of the Brickworks Community Centre. You could easily imagine this as a satellite community hub from the Brickworks. There's a lot of organisation that comes out of Brickworks. It's tremendously successful, and Colin at Brickworks has heard nothing about this at all. The design is not suited to the community. It's not been designed with the community in mind. The office is accessed from the room that is called the community room. So it just means that really whenever the MCC guys are there, they're going to be making use of the community room. The kitchen is at the back, again, linked to the community room and linked to the office. So there's no sense that a multi-use has been considered in the design. It really lacks imagination. I'm really disappointed that the space at the back, that enclosure that's just got loads of kind of rubbish and barriers and metal barriers and stuff hasn't been considered as part of the plan. And there was a great opportunity to design out the potential for crime down the far end of the pavilion. We know that space is misused. There's potentially drug dealing and other social behaviour happening down there. The great opportunity here is to rethink this whole part of the park and say, how can it serve everybody better? How can it take away those places that are dangerous for the community? And the strategy for this has been formed over the last 5 years or so. The building was formally shut, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. It was in a terrible state before that. And the people that form that strategy are the local councillors. And so it's hugely important that, if I was there, I would be calling for a full rethink of this strategy, a proper community consultation, develop a community vision for the space. I don't want to prejudge how much cricket should happen there. I think it's a good place for cricket, and we see a lot of great kids cricket and cricket for women potentially, and the right kind of balance. But that place can be designed so that both can happen at the same time. The community room can be used by people, kids could use it, parties, yoga, tai chi, whatever you want to do in that space while cricket's still happening on the other side of the building. On the near end, you could put a shutter and a kitchen shutter and a hatch, and then that a community cafe could still be operating while the community room's working, while the cricket's working. So it just needs to work a lot harder. We know we're in a very dense part of London, one of the densest wards in the whole of London. That sort of design needs to work a lot harder. So we need to rethink, we need meaningful consultation, we need to develop a proper community plan for this that does include cricket, but has much more balance and much more engagement with the community.
Thank you, Jonathan. And so this is where we kick into the second question about the park. There's a theme, but not too much of a theme, I hope. The second question. During last week's brief project meeting, we were told that our councillors could not speak to us because of PERDA rules. That's why I was surprised today when I saw a short Pacific Cricket Club video in praise of cricket that had been liked on Twitter by one of our councillors, Flora Williamson, and by council leader Kaya Corner-Schwartz, and also by deputy leader Dermot Ward. Given this implies a lack of objectivity on the part of Islington Council's senior leadership, how will you fight for the people of Tollington if you're elected? Can you speak truth to power? Mick.
Well, look, I mean, I know the councillors you're talking about. I know them well. I mean, this seems like as if it's the people against bureaucracy. I know each one of those councillors would be listened to. I know that John had, you for example, would have had a perfect opportunity to speak to local councillors. I can't comment about what you're saying about the PERDA rules and them putting out, is it a video you were saying? Because I don't know anything about this at all.
Yeah, it's a video on Twitter that Pacific Cricket Club put out, but it was liked by one of our councillors and two senior council members. And I thought that was a bit inappropriate in the circumstances, particularly as we were told by that same councillor that they couldn't talk because of PERDA rules just last week. It seems odd.
Right, okay. Well, I mean, I can't answer your question, Johnny, about that. All I will say is that, you know, these councillors are approachable. They're not in some bureaucracy bubble as being portrayed. And I just wondered, did Friends of Wray Crescent submit during the consultation period, made a submission during the consultation period? Because I think some of the things about a multi-use of the pavilion, some of it has been met, and maybe more could have. There's more time, more scope to put in multi-use of the pavilion.
I'd like to answer your question, but I feel it might be inappropriate to get into that because we kind of got a structure here. But my feeling is that the consultation is still going on, and that in negotiation with the council last week and the week before, they seemed very reluctant to make any changes to the plan to reflect that, which is part of why we're so cross. Yeah. So have you finished, Mick?
For the time being, yeah.
Okay. Jane, can you speak truth to power?
You have to speak truth to power. What's the point of being elected if you can't go and then speak for the people you're representing? And if people vote for me, they will know what I'm standing for. They've heard it this evening. You have to. There's no way that you can go and join the council and meekly say, yes, yes, okay, you've been doing this for the last, I don't know how many years, months, planning this thing, and okay, well, that's it. I've won, I'm not going to say anything, I'll just go along with the herd. No, certainly not. Having sat on the Conservation Committee all those years ago, I know perfectly well that unless you speak up, you will be bulldozed by the people who already have vested interests and have spent probably years planning this program, planning this, building and the plans for developing it into a centre of excellence. It will be very painful. And I actually, as a teacher, I'm perfectly used to standing up in front of people and telling them things they don't like to hear. I have today sent rather a lot of very rude people out of the classroom, and therefore I am not at all afraid to take the voice of the people of Tollington and make sure that it is heard. It may mean that I become rather unpopular, but then considering I would be one of a tiny minority of opposition councillors, the more the merrier, say I, and the louder the voice. But the important thing is that you yourselves and all the people that you can rally and your petitions and your actions and possibly a citizens' assembly, as I've suggested before, also do your part so that I know what you want me to say. And so I can go to people with a very strong programme of how we would like to see Wray Crescent, what our vision for Wray Crescent is going to be. There's not very much time left. I mean, there's not much time between the 1st of July and the 16th if the consultation is finishing on the 16th. So that would mean that between the 1st and the 16th, when probably people are already wondering whether they shouldn't go off and have their summer holidays in, I don't know, Isle of Wight or something, to actually consider this, the objections and put the programme on hold. This is, I think, the only thing that we can hope for at this moment, is to put it on hold rather than rushing ahead. I was very alarmed to hear that they were planning to start building in the autumn. Well, that's no time at all. So really, we've been bounced into it, quite frankly, and we'll just have to make the protests as loud as possible. And having a spokesperson within the council doing the shouting might be of some use, hopefully.
Thank you, Jane. Jonathan.
Thanks, Johnny. I mean, yeah, I think I wouldn't be shouting in the council. I'd be pointing out that what's actually what's correct consultation, and the council properly knows how to do this. It's going to spend over £500,000 on Woodfall Park and has run a consultation on it. It's going to spend £750,000 on Bingfield Park, is running a consultation on it. It's going to rebuild the Cornwallis Adventure Playground building, £500,000, and they're currently running a consultation now. And here's the consultation leaflet that's been running since March. They decided to do another round, just I think closed last week. So the council and the officers know how to do this, so they just need to be reminded that that is the case. If this does come forward to planning, I mean, I would absolutely call for a halt, and I've said before, and rerun the proper consultation, a design consultation where people's voices can be heard in terms of the things they want to see there. But if this does come to planning, actually planning is a very good process which we can all get involved in, and we can all write, and we can represent our views at the meeting, and then it is the councillors that will be deciding in a planning meeting. So if they had the nerve and the cheek to go against the views of the community that were very clearly expressed, probably petitions, etc. as well, then I would be very surprised. In the past, when the council wanted to put up the post, the big cricket posts and the netting, that properly spoke truth to power. I made a 10-metre high mock-up of one of those posts and put it in the park and took photos of it, and that got in the paper. So I'm not scared of doing that kind of stuff. It was a bit of a stunt. It was actually quite difficult to do. It was a bit hairy, 10-metre posts, you know. But anyway, so yeah, so I'm not scared of that at all, and we need to do imaginative things sometimes as well. We just need to kind of get out there and make a bit of noise. I think do it politely, do it respectfully of these people who have got a job to do. If they haven't been given the strategy by their councillors to go out and consult with the community, as we heard from Barry. Barry was telling us it's not in his brief to consider the community. It's not in his brief to go further. His brief was to come up with a good plan for a new cricket pavilion. So that's where the lack of imagination is, and I think that's what went wrong in the process. So we've got to be careful, respectful of these good council officers trying to do their job and too many shouty people is not polite, it's not respectful. Everyone's got a job to do, but we've got to make sure it starts from the right point. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And this is where, thank you all, actually. These are great answers. And I think everybody's getting somewhere here. But this is where we sort of ask the audience to ask some questions, because actually, how often do you get to? And that's a very important part of this. And it's also where I disappear and cease to be the link man and Sasha takes over. So the first thing is, if anybody has a question, if you know how to use the raise hand function, now's a good time to use it. And otherwise, if you could put them in chat. We've been monitoring chat during this, so some questions have been picked up. So thank you all very much, Sasha.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to start. We've had a couple of questions which were sent in to us via email. So I'm going to start with them, and then I'll get to the questions that I've been logging from the chat room we've had here. The first one is from Roger. Roger, if you are there, can you unmute yourself and you can ask the question yourself? Otherwise, I'll ask it for you.
Please ask it for me, Sasha.
Okay, thank you. Roger said, this relates to the park. Roger asks, because there has been no consultation with the local community about their needs, which goes against Islington Council's obligations to the people of Tollington, if elected, how will you work towards getting this project stopped, and how will you ensure consultation is done properly? And I'll start with Mick. So if you could unmute yourself, Mick.
Well, as Friends of Wray Crescent know, there has been consultation since 2018. I mean, the chair and the secretary would be aware of that.
I can fill you in on that. We went to one meeting and we suggested to the project managers that we met that we suggested that they consult with the community, and that there were lots of different activities that could go into the open space in Wray Crescent Park. And then we actually didn't hear anything up until the proposal was put through our door a few weeks ago. So just filling you in on that.
What was the question? I mean, Roger mentioned. What was the original question?
Okay, it was because there has been no consultation with the local community about their needs, which goes against Islington Council's obligations to the people of Tollington. If elected, how will you work towards getting this project stopped, and how will you ensure consultation is properly done?
Well, I don't think I mean, looking at the consultation, what the council have written, I think it's a question of encouraging more community use, and as Jonathan pointed out, Jonathan Ward, that is, you know, it's part of the planning process to go forward. You know, so there's all kinds of. I don't think it's. I mean, I know the 16th of July is upon us, but there is room for scope to put you know, community use in the proposals. And it is going to be used for multi-purpose. I mean, they did say that on the consultation document, and they do mention, you know, Friends of Wray Crescent have been briefed on this, and I feel, you know, I feel that it's not the end. It's not too late, really, to be part of the process in consultation. You know, I don't think it's going to be a cut-off period of 16th, because I mean, it'll be monitored. All this will be, you know, particularly the youth policy and community policy and schools. Once it takes off, once this is opened up, the pavilion and the field and the park. Okay, all right. I mean, I will. What I want to say is that I'm here to listen to all concerns. You know, but what I've seen of the consultation, I'm quite impressed, actually. I've got to say that I'm not a cricket fan at all, but I do believe encouraging sports for young people, particularly. And I think it's you know,
okay.
We can't ignore that.
Thank you, Mick. Can I move on to Jane?
Yeah.
Would you like me to repeat the question, Jane?
I do understand the question.
Okay.
Being a local resident, I feel I should have known about this consultation if it had existed. In fact, it was only yourselves, the Friends of Wray Crescent, bringing it up and attracting our attention to the group meeting the other day, that I was even aware that there were plans to have a brand new, wonderful, all singing, all dancing cricket pavilion. Certainly nothing as a local resident have I seen in terms of consultation. I brought up this matter at the meeting, the Zoom meeting, and I was told the consultation starts here, because I actually asked them exactly that question. How is it that you're coming to us with a ready-made plan, all costed and probably has cost money to consultants to draw up the actual drawings and the mock-up of what it would look like, going around talking to people to ask for money. I would imagine this has been a very expensive process. And yet we are presented with it as if it was brand new, fresh out of an egg. So there hasn't been consultation in any meaningful form. It could be that they have invited you to one meeting, but that is not public consultation, is it? Because the Friends of Wray Crescent as a voluntary group, it does not necessarily represent all the local residents. If there were time, I brought up the question of a citizens' assembly. I think that is possibly, together with the petitions and so on that you are organising, would be a possibility, because you have to invite witnesses, you have to invite specialists to speak. Council members would be invited to come and speak to the assembled residents, to speak about it and be challenged and questioned in public. I would certainly support something like that. And if councillors refused to come or found excuses not to come, that would speak volumes, it seems to me, in terms of not wanting to become accountable for the plans that they've put together. There is, of course, very little one can do, perhaps, between the 1st and the 16th of July. if really that is the cut-off date. But I would have thought that we were told at the meeting the other week that the consultation starts here, we need to have, is it 6 to 12 weeks of consultation? Until the 16th of July, we're not even talking 6 weeks. Therefore, I would have thought there's a certain level of challenge that we should put together, maybe even on a legal basis, that the consultation has not taken place and it is breaking the council's own rules in that respect. I'm not sure if I've answered the question, because I'm not entirely sure whether we're talking about the day after being elected or the weeks after that, because, as I say, the consultation period rather puts brackets around what you can do.
Thank you, Jane. Can I move the same question to Jonathan? We've actually got quite a lot of questions to go through. So if we could maybe just have a few minutes for each candidate, if that's all right. Do you need me to reread the question,
Yes,
Jonathan?
please. Thanks, Sasha.
Because there has been no consultation with the local community about their needs, which goes against Islington Council's obligations to the people of Tollington, if elected, how will you work towards getting this project stopped, and how will you ensure consultation is properly done?
Yeah, I think you just need to comment on a couple of things Mick has said. He's saying it's not the end, and he's saying it's time to change it. Well, we need to understand what that process might be. The consultation that's being run at the moment is not one on the design, it is one on the management plan, i.e. kind of like how many hours might someone get to use it for different uses. That's all we're being asked about. We have been told that the very next step is to take this into the planning process, and it's obvious that the design is not fit for purpose. It's just not designed in a way that will allow the community to have flexible use of this building, and it's not taken advantage of that whole area, all the space that needs reworking and is working out. The first thing I would do, if this plan goes according to, as we've been told, the council have very formally told us in 2 consultation meetings that the next step is to planning. I would be talking to the councillors who sit on that planning committee and explain them in great detail what has gone wrong with this process. That is the process for planning. There's the chair of that planning committee, and there's a set of councillors that are elected to that. I would then be insisting that they don't vote against it. The actual fact they're advising their officers, the planning officers, to tell the guys bringing forward this planning application that it's not meeting the requirements for full consultation for such a community facility. As I said, there's got plenty of examples where the council does it properly, and gets the input of the community.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. The next question is from Eliza Midgley. Eliza, I can't see your name up here. If you are here, can you unmute? And otherwise I'll ask.
I've had an email from her. She couldn't get through.
Right. Okay. I will go with the question anyway, because it's relevant. A resident at one of the historic Italian garden villas, 96 to 108 Tollington Park, formerly known as Duodene Villas, made contact to say that there have been many threats to develop the villas in the last few years, and a harmful scheme to build on the garden is in the process of being approved. Despite it being recognised as an important heritage asset, and rare as it is unaltered in size and layout from the 19th century, 1830 to 1840, this development sets a harmful precedent and impacts a significant piece of architectural history within the area. If elected, what will you do to delay this plan? And Mick, I will start with you.
I don't know, the building concerned, is it listed at all?
She doesn't say in her question whether it's listed. I would imagine 1830 to 1840 it may be, or it's possibly due to be.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it'll be listed. I mean, because we want to preserve buildings like that. I mean, I don't really know the ins and outs and details of it, but it'd be something that we, you know, if elected, I would look into, because I think it's very important to preserve historical buildings.
Yes, I mean, she's saying it's a significant piece of architectural history within the area. And if elected, what would you do to delay this plan? So.
Well, I would probably, well, I'd get in contact with her first, you know, to find out more, probably through email or whatever, to find out where this where it particularly is. Is this in Tollington Park by any chance?
Tollington Park, yes, Tollington Park Road.
Oh, no. What number is it? Sorry.
96 is the Italianati Garden Villas, 96 to 108 Tollington Park.
Right,
That's what
okay.
she's written here.
Right, okay. Well, I'd like to look into it, and probably if you drop me your email address or something, you know, I can find out a bit more.
Okay, okay, thank you. Rushing through, Jane, I ask you the same question. You probably know the building.
I know these buildings, they're fascinating. One of them's got a ballroom, they used to have stables behind. They've been chopped up into apartments, but the real threat here is not so much to the buildings themselves, but to the space behind. And so what we're talking about again is an assault on green space. And I know that this particular case, I mean, I know I have seen some of the correspondence going on about this, and it is in fact the case that it keeps coming back and back, that developers want to ruin really the wholeness, the whole concept of these villas, including their gardens. Now, I think the important thing would be to support Philippa, did you say her name was? What was her name?
The person in question who asked, Eliza or Alyssa Midgley?
Yes, I think the important thing will be to get, add the power of a councillor's voice to her case, because I think it's very well founded, and she has been struggling alone on this. I know the Tollington Park Action Group have tried to support her, but obviously they're not on the council, they don't have a foot inside the door. So obviously somebody with a foot inside the door who is sympathetic to the conservation area and knows the difficulties there has always been to get the council to respect what goes on in the north of the borough would make a considerable difference. And I think this is one of the first things I would like to get involved in.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Jonathan, same question to you.
Thank you. I mean, I really support, in the interest of brevity, I really support everything Jane has said in terms of like preserving that heritage that we have. What I would say is that I would be pushing very hard to get onto the planning committees, one of the planning committees. I'm actually currently employed on a sort of ad hoc basis by Islington Council to provide design advice to the council. They have something called the Design Review Panel. And so it's a very good example of how they seek external specialist advice to support projects that are coming forward. So I would, in this instance, I would be looking to get onto a planning committee and make sure the right questions are being asked of these projects. Islington planning policy is quite strong, is actually quite good at protecting these kind of assets, but equally there's been a huge underfunding of the resources in order to kind of support council officers, and so it's actually very hard for them to resist strong developers. So I think we'll be working hard to support the officers to make
Thank
sure
you.
That's preserved.
I'm going to take a question from Natalie and Babs. Both have their hands up. Natalie, may I take your question first? Can you unmute yourself?
I can, yes.
Thank you. Ask away.
Okay, so I've got two questions. One I've submitted in the chat already. And this is to all councillors. And as we know, we're in COVID-19, still in the pandemic. It's had huge impacts, mental health, unemployment, widening gaps in education attainment, health impacts, a range of things. And these are all issues that are pertinent in Tollington. So I'm really interested in understanding, in particular, what each councillor will be looking to do to address this issue, particularly for children and young adults. And specifically, I'd be really interested in hearing your views around how you would address issues such as children becoming exploited, tackling unemployment in the ward and contributing to it across the borough, widening education gaps, and another question my second question would also be, I've heard a lot about listening to the voices of people in Tollington, and I'm just really interested in understanding what tangible actions will be taken to do that and make sure it's not just the typical voices that shout the loudest that are heard and listened to.
Thank you. Mick, I'll start with you on that question, if I may.
Yeah, that's quite a question. Regarding young people being exploited, you know, I'd like to play a role where a connection between, well, as a councillor, if elected, that is, as a councillor, one of my concerns would be young people, how we encourage them to play a valuable part in society, rather than sort of, no, some youngsters tend to sort of delve into crime. I think that's the bad side of what we see. So all those bodies concerned, like teachers, parents, school governors, I would work alongside them to find any solution of any problems that we come across. I think that the questions went into different directions. So if it's about young people, I specifically would like that connection, you know, between schools and sort of youth facilities, which are draining. As we know, there's austerity measures. The youth facilities are the first to go out the window. We've had a lot of austerity measures right throughout the board, and you know, I'd work in conjunction with other councillors who specialise in this field. I mean, it's not my speciality, to be totally honest, but you learn as a councillor working with others and how to network and in bettering choice for young people and giving them an opportunity and a bit more encouragement. So I don't even know if that answers your question, because there was quite a number of questions there.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to pass the question to Jane.
Yes, Mick's made a good point that the council finances are very squeezed, obviously, because the Tory government over a number of years has restricted what they hand out to councils, and councils have had to make choices what they spend their money on. But certainly with the pandemic, young people have particularly suffered, and the closure of youth clubs, the closure of all sorts of facilities for children of all ages has really badly affected families. Young babies born during the COVID, during the lockdown, have been completely unsocialized because the mothers haven't been able to go to mother and baby units. Young people have been left to their own devices, mostly Twitter and TikTok and goodness knows what else, because they haven't been attending school. They have to fill their time with something. I think one of the things that I would certainly want to do is to relook at the budget for facilities for young people, and also to talk to schools, because schools can actually run a lot of after-school activities. The trouble is funding. In some boroughs, parents can afford to pay for the extra after-school activities. In this borough, it would be difficult to get parents to do that. In fact, probably impossible and undesirable. So those are the two areas that I specifically would like to concentrate on, would be making sure that young people had something to do outside school, or that there are activities for them to carry on doing at school. The other issue has been that young people have been left with no idea what their prospects are. Their last, especially the year 11s and the year 13s, a lot of them have come out of school with no idea what their future is going to be. Should they do an apprenticeship? Where can they find employment? And there's very, very little guidance for them. So that's another area the council could certainly help, was to try and orient young people towards the sort of things that they could, so they can see a prospect for their future.
Thank you, Jane.
Is that enough?
Yes, thank you. Jonathan.
Thanks. Yeah. Natalie, I think you're talking about engaging the community, and I think what's been quite impressive actually is how people have really rallied round, how the various mutual aid groups and the WhatsApp groups, street communities have formed, and I'd be really seeking to find ways to support that. I do feel that the council tend to have quite a top-down, we sort out the community, we organise this, we organise the other. But what I would love to see is the council facilitating and activating our amazing community, because there is such a diversity, such a richness of all the different people that live in Tollington Ward, and you know, together we're better. I think we need to kind of find ways of making that happen. So neighbourhood meetings, etc., would be one way of doing that. But I think the community groups, a community facility in the park, all that kind of stuff is what can bring us together and build on actually what has been perhaps a surprising part of all that negative stuff that you mentioned as well. Particularly, I totally agree with the supporting youth facilities and youth activities. From my involvement with St Mark's, I'm very aware that they have very little in the way of youth support workers and community policing, and that's a kind of really basic level. They just don't get access to that in the way they did in the past. And I would just be, even with this tight budget, you know, budget constraints, I would be just saying, can we have a little bit of a share of what IAMS have to go around the primary schools just to help the teachers? The teachers do an amazing job, and they are picking up the pieces on all those mental health issues. It's amazing the dedication we've seen from our teachers. So I'd just be saying, can we squeeze out, can we share that resource a little bit more in lots of different places, rather than, you know, IAMS have more of it. I'm sure they need it, but at a time of need, there's nothing in the primary schools. You talked about unemployment as well, and I think green jobs and renovation and getting people's homes more draft-proof, insulated, better ventilated, better lighting, etc., is a really great opportunity. The GLA are running a skills initiative on this, and something at Holloway Prison we're looking at is that there will be training opportunities for people to learn these green renovation skills, and that's, you know, it's not hugely complicated, but it is a new set of skills that people need to learn.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. I'm going to take a question from Alden. Alden, if you're here, would you like to unmute? Otherwise, I'll come. You're there.
Yeah, I am. I really was just, I think actually you covered most of it in this session, but I was particularly interested in things that people have done or plan to do specifically within the Tollington ward. I mean, because it always seems to me that the point about this election is that it's for a Tollington ward councillor, not for Barnsbury or Highbury or Pan Islington. It's about this particular ward. So I'm interested in what you have done, what you'd like to do within this ward.
Mick, would you like to answer first?
I think what I'd like to do actually is what's you know, canvassing up in Tollington Park and Wray Crescent and around. Traffic is quite a major concern, and HGV vehicles particularly. And I think there's a need for calming the street calming, if you like, traffic calming of particularly heavy goods vehicles around the area, and you know, you know, also the Hanley Road, the Hanley Medical Centre. I'd certainly want to get involved in that. I think that's something to campaign on, the GP practice. I'd also, I mean, what I really feel strong about, as far as the borough's concerned, I mean, and Tollington, which includes, I mean, Tollington spreads, as we know, right out to Strout Green Road. You know, it takes in part of Holloway Road, Hornsey Road, and of course, housing being sort of a motive subject of that I feel very strong about. The private rented sector, I very much want to get involved and strengthen the council's resolve on regulating. We want fair rents and fair terms and conditions for private renters. We don't want to be in a situation where about 5 years ago in Caledonian Road, for example, that infamous landlord was bypassing planning permission. So we want to regulate planning permission. We want to give tenants rights. At the same time, we want to encourage good landlords who can house people, and this goes in conjunction with providing housing and council housing and building housing for people.
Okay, thank you, Mick. I'm going to stop you there because I'm just anxious to get through as many questions as I can. But Jane, would you like to answer the question?
Yes, I think there are two things really. The first one, I would like to see through to a very satisfactory conclusion all the work we've been doing on mitigating the traffic problem on this side of Hornsey Road, Tollington Park and all the associated small streets. So that is one of the things that was very close to my heart, and I would like to see and work towards making sure that in the shortest possible time, it's not just the control of HGV vehicles, although obviously that's something that could be dealt with reasonably quickly, but the whole business of possibly moving towards low traffic neighbourhood or some variant on that is supported by the local community. The other area which nobody's actually mentioned much up until now is crime. Park, all around the area around Finsbury Park Station, in the ward, I think most people have suffered one way or the other from some aspect of crime.
Okay.
Hopefully not. I mean, there have been violent crimes, but I would certainly want to see that an area where I would bring my influence to bear.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you. Jonathan, if you'd like to unmute.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, I think obviously traffic calming on Tollington Park is a huge issue. It's been a huge issue for a long time, and the council are responsible for designing the road narrowings, etc., that have been in place for quite a long time now. So, it's sort of it is frustrating that we haven't had this addressed sooner. I would push for. I just feel actually that Tollington is a sort of slightly taken for granted ward, and that some certain environmental improvements and investment that the other wards might see we haven't really seen a lot of that. I'd like to get a lot more bike stores so that people can own bikes and have them in the street, in these bike stores in the street. There's many street trees missing. I reckon there's a good more than 30 street trees missing across the ward, and they provide a great benefit to us in terms of keeping the streets cool, trapping pollution, biodiversity, etc. So I think I'll be really pushing for that street tree replacement to happen. Cyclical works on the council housing is clear that something that is not happening across the borough, and so I would be looking and really seeking out council tenants in the ward who are struggling with their living conditions, and really targeting helping them to get that work done.
Right.
And petty drug dealing on street corners is a real problem, and people don't like it, and I would like to find a way that can be reported more safely, in a way that people feel that they're not putting themselves in danger. And I think we can together make an effort to push that out of this area, and hopefully that will then keep our kids in who are vulnerable to that criminal activity, keep them safer.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm going to go to, it was an email question earlier, Viv Whittingham, if you can unmute yourself, ask your question, or I'm happy to read it for you.
Can you do it for me, please?
Of course, of course.
Thank you.
Viv asks, how do you, I think this relates to the park pavilion, how do you take into account local need when embarking on this project? What do you consider to be good practice in developing a local park? And that question goes to Mick, first of all.
Well, I mean, parks, as everyone knows, are important spaces, and there's the pavilion. I think this is all about the pavilion. Cricket has I think the community, it's important that it's a community asset, and it's important that the community are involved in the park. And I just feel, I mean, I just feel it wouldn't have got the funding otherwise if it wasn't for, you know, Sports England and the London Marathon, for example. So the funding wasn't there, and I've seen elsewhere. I can go other boroughs. I can remember particularly one in Brent, where the park was totally neglected, totally misused. There was antisocial behaviour in that park. I mean, that's another little area. But if there's no investment in the park, then that's what happens. And I think this is an investment. I want Friends of Wray Crescent. I want the community to be involved in it. I don't want them to be left out of it. It feels as if you feel that people haven't been involved in the consultation. I still think there's a need to get, you know, you can, I feel that there is room for scope that you can get involved and be part of that. We can have that as a multi-use pavilion, but I don't think the council would have had the fund, you know, funding for sports and funding for parks. I've seen what parks are like when they're neglected, and antisocial behaviour just takes root. And I don't want to see that part of Wray Crescent as like I want any other park. The precious spaces.
Okay, thank you, Mick. Move on to Jane with the same question. Do you need me to repeat the question?
Yes, if you would, thank you.
Okay. Viv asks, how do you take into account local need, or sorry, how do you take into account local need when embarking on this project? So I think she's speaking to Islington really. What do you consider to be good practice in developing a local park?
Well, I think one of the things that has emerged that particularly with the so-called consultation the other week was what a range of different people actually have spoken up. And I think one of the things we don't know is, do we know our local residents well enough? Do we know who actually uses the park? We may have some ideas and we speak among ourselves a lot, but I believe there are lots of very quiet voices out there that we haven't necessarily heard. Now, I know you've put out some questionnaires about what sort of things would you like to have in the park, but are we reaching all the people that might actually be using it, but feel that, or are not aware that they could be consulted? So I think one of the first things we need to do is really contact as many residents as possible. I mean, Tollington Ward is not that ginormous. It's practically possible to leaflet it in, you know, in a reasonably short amount of time. But what we really need to do is to bring people forward who do use it, but haven't spoken until now. They will have ideas. They will know what they want. A lot of it will just be a space to put a picnic blanket down. Others will want to have organized sports for their children. Others will want to be able to perhaps have a running track. Others might want to have a water fountain. There are all sorts of really attractive features, but we're not yet entirely sure which ones will be supported by which people. This is the thing we have to address.
Right, thank you, Jane. Same question to Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, again, for brevity, I'm gonna agree with a lot of Jane said and not just say it again. It's just about finding all the different groups that use the park. I think then we get into imaginative design for the spaces, creating you know, a variety of spaces as part of that development. If we're going to pause the project, which we really do have to, it has to be paused. At that point, we'd go and seek more funding from Cripplegate or the Morris Trust or these different charities that really do support communities, and say, and let's push that building a little bit more. Let's make it 10, 20% bigger. That then kind of like makes it a little bit easier for some of those cricket necessities that we're being told to still be kept there. But then we've just got the flexibility for the community use to be compatible with that. So it doesn't have to be a conversation about cricket or community. We can do both.
Right, thank you. I'm going to go to Babs Davis. Babs, you've had your hand up an awful long time. I'm sorry. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, sorry. I'm using my wife's phone because I don't have Zoom on mine. So I'm Paul. My wife Babs. Very thankfully, I'm thankful that you let me borrow my phone. Anyway, just quickly, I wanted to answer one thing that Jane mentioned about like what is Middlesex. Oh, I'm a local resident and I play cricket at Wray Crescent. What is Middlesex doing there? I was curious myself. Emailed them and they said the office is for their full-time coach who delivers in schools in the community, and Islington is also the only borough in Middlesex that has a dedicated full-time coach, just so you know. My question is, in 1999 the council laid the artificial cricket track at Wray with a commitment to protect and maintain it as the borough's only cricket facility. All the money raised from the ECB, from the London Marathon Charitable Trust, from Sport England, from the London Cricket Trust, and from private individuals like my teammate James Gledo, who a longtime Islington resident who cashed in his life insurance in 2018 before dying of bowel cancer at age 36 to donate £15,000 to the Wray Crescent refurbishment. It's specifically for the cricket pitch and it's only available because of the cricket pitch. So I would just wanted to clear, like, confirm with the councillors that you believe those commitments should be honored. And if not, how would that square with policy CS17 of Islington's core strategy, which states that the council will safeguard all existing sport provision and improve their quality? Thank you.
Start with you, Mick. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, God, I'm sorry to hear about your friend. Yeah, the funding comes from all those sources, and you know, it's regarding Middlesex. I think this thing about Middlesex. I mean, they've got a coach and they've got a coach office, and I understand this coach is traveling around North London boroughs probably, and that office space will be used for that particular training coach. Middlesex aren't going to, I mean, I think we should all know it's a part of their charity, if you like, that they put into youth training and sports to try and promote cricket.
Right.
I don't think that they're going to use it as a training ground. I mean, they've got enough facilities elsewhere, probably outside London, as a professional team. This is for community use, it's for team use, and it's not for it's to promote the sport, of course, and it's to give children, kids, hopefully, and young people, and people a chance to play cricket in a city area. And there's not many facilities. It's certainly not in Islington to cater for cricket. So I think it's a way of promoting the sport, particularly for young people.
I'm going to stop you there, Mick, because I want to whiz through these questions. Jane, your response, please.
A quick comment. I think there's a misunderstanding that they were against cricket. I mean, yes, it's great. Yeah, play cricket. That's fine. You know, we've been playing cricket on Wray Crescent for donkey's years, and they should well continue. And certainly the changing rooms are absolutely appalling, and they should be replaced. And certainly if there are going to be sort of programs for young people to learn how to play cricket, that's fantastic as well. I think all that we're asking for is an equitable share in the time given, equitable share of the use of the open space. That's, I think, really sums it up. Nobody's objecting to cricket. By all means, play it. I actually quite like to hear the thump of the ball on the willow. I've actually played cricket myself. I wouldn't play it again now, but I used to enjoy sitting in the outdoor field doing nothing. But I think we need to get over the idea that people do not want the cricket played. Of course they do. It's just that it needs to share.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Jonathan?
Yeah, I think I knew James actually briefly. I should say that, you know, he was a very well respected member of the community, and he was a real listener actually to the needs of everybody in the park there, and he was, you know, very sensitive to that, and obviously greatly missed, and that was an amazing gesture, effort that he made. But I think there is a risk that that cricket will take priority in the park. The council have already spent £65,000 on that netting, which was kind of a very partial thing. You could easily be walking in one part of the park and get hit on the head by a cricket ball because there's no netting there. And we never got a proper explanation why the netting didn't go all the way around. If it was necessary, why didn't it go all the way around? And I think there's a little bit of suspicion about this cricket thing because the building is so obviously designed for cricket only. It's basically a cricket pavilion design that has been dropped down on the park. Now, if that office was accessed from the outside, so use of it didn't interfere with the community space, if the kitchen was in a different place so that it could serve the community, if there was actually a door into the community room, not from the cricket space, all those things would help people to sort of see that cricket could still carry on using more or less of the building. I mean, at the moment they don't use any of the building at all, but they'll have a better facility for toilets and changing. They'll have a new cricket pitch down the middle. That's funded separately, by the way. That's funded by ECB. And the council are spending £250,000 on this at their own discretion. That's not money that is it's just straightforward council funding. There's nothing says there has to be sport funding. So it's about the balance, and it's about making sure that design doesn't look like it's a cricket only building.
Right. Thank you, Jonathan. I'm going to take a question from Trisha Woodhouse. Trish, if you're there, would you like to unmute? So many faces. You've actually posed 2 questions. I'm not sure which one you want to ask, whether it relates to housing or the consultation. Is Trish there? Johnny, can you see Trish?
I'm searching for Trish now. No. Okay,
well, in that case, let me just see what her question was. It was a question relating to housing, space, etc. She asks, how do you think overcrowding in homes, lack of outdoor space, poor housing in general, impacts on families within Tollington Ward? And that question is to you, Mick, first of all.
Well, as I go along canvassing, I'm picking up casework, and there was a time when I'd have been able to say to Flora or Richard Watts when he was councillor, this is casework. But now the kind of bucks will probably stop with me. Overcrowding is one of the issues that I've come across. And, it will be casework that I'll probably have to do. So overcrowding in existing premises, hopefully, you're limited to what you can do. And I would like to I know that the casework, I'll be will be liaising with other councillors, particularly those on the housing area, regarding overcrowding when these specific areas come across. Overcrowding it's a question about new build. I'm a bit unsure whether it was new build.
No, she simply asks, how do you think overcrowding in homes and the lack of outdoor space and the poor housing in general impacts on families within Tollington Ward?
Yeah, well, it does. It impacts a lot. It impacts a lot on children. We've got a tireless MP, Jeremy Corbyn, who will tell you a lot of his casework is overcrowding, and it affects the their education, affects when they do their homework, it affects children's development as they grow up, as they're growing up, so overcrowding affects families particularly just kind of a pandemic, during a pandemic. And if they haven't got any open space, I mean, Wray Crescent being an open space, but if they haven't got open space gardens or any open space, it does affect their mental health.
Thank you, Mick. We've got a couple more questions before we wrap up, so I'm just going to go to Jane with the same question, if you don't mind.
I think this relates back to why people are making objections about what's going to happen in Wray Crescent, is that people have we're very flat intensive, and people live in flats, whether they're young professionals or whether they're families living in council or housing association houses. In the end, if you do not have a garden, your only resort is a park. And I think we just keep coming back to the same issue, is that we're depriving people who are short of greenery, who are short of an open space to go to relax, if we do what we intend to do, develop Wray Crescent in the way that's intended at the moment.
Thank you, Jane. Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm concerned about this. Some aspects of the council of the redevelopment of, for example, the Andover estate shows there's a loss of a ball court there. There's a loss of a playground, loss of some growing area, and I'm concerned that that is just cramming homes in a way that actually doesn't make for good. It doesn't, as Mick says, it doesn't address people's well-being if they're crammed in and haven't got any decent outside space around them. And I'm really worried about that. And as I say, it's the sort of thing at the Holloway Prison project we're particularly concerned about: badly ventilated designs coming forward from the developer, so that which gives you overheating homes. And I think the council needs to be a lot stricter on avoiding poor quality, even new build. There's plenty of examples of new build that's overheating around the Arsenal and other places, and that's got to be avoided massively, because it's just storing up problems for the future. And if you're on the list and you're going to get social housing, then you probably got certain vulnerabilities, whether that's health or mental health, or you've got sort of family needs, and there's going to be a lot of reasons why you do need a robust, decent place to live. And badly designed new homes is adding insult to injury.
Right, thank you. I've got two more questions. I'm quickly going to go to Sarah Roth. Sarah, if you'd like to unmute your computer.
Right. This is just a very quick remark, observation. I've lived in Tollington Ward since 1987. The last 6 months have seen an incredible upswing in drug use. To come out of my building on Grenville Road and find 2 women boiling up crack was a bit of a shock. And we know where the dealers are, and they hang out on the corner. I'd like to hear from the councillors how they work with the police and why all of a sudden this has happened.
Okay. Question to you first, Mick. Couple of minutes only.
Yeah, just to say, I mean, as councillor, I'll be liaising with the police, community police, and seeing how we can solve this problem, because it just seems like a growing problem. And I've noticed as well, there's other antisocial behaviour. I think shoplifting has increased during the pandemic for some reason.
People are hungry.
Yeah, but with the drug-related crime, it's an issue London-wide, and I think it needs more joint up thinking with other London boroughs. I think it has to be solved. It's just an enormous, and again, we need more police on the streets, really. I know that sounds quite simple. We've had cutbacks from central government, and one of the things that we should be pushing for is more police, in solving this, and more neighbourhood schemes where we can sort of rid this, antisocial behaviour that shouldn't be tolerated at all. So as councillor, I'll do my best in trying to liaise with the police on that.
Thank you, Mick. Jane?
It's a huge problem, and it's related to all sorts of other things that we've discussed this evening. I think, as Viv mentioned, it is related to poverty. It's related to the lockdown. It's related to schools being closed. It's related to the lack of attention around Finsbury Park Station. It's the difficulty of during this time of COVID, of having the resources to deal with it. Obviously, the council cannot force the police to to act, and the police themselves are very short of cash. They've closed the police station on Hornsey Road. I consider that to be one of the moments when things started to go downhill in terms of crime in this area. The unfortunate thing is they will say they don't have the cash to open it up again. They're also cutting back on community support officers. So this is really a mixture of the breakdown of society during the lockdown and the fact that this government will not properly fund the organizations that can help us. I see it as mainly as a question of money, and the council will have to address that one way or the other by putting pressure, by talking. I would like to see an action group like our traffic one on crime, because I think a lot of it is hidden. A lot of people suffer, a lot of people have problems. We don't know about it, and they don't necessarily know how to share that information with others so as to get a bit of a momentum going.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you. Jonathan.
So obviously I'm going to agree with Jane and Mick, but I would say it's not just an issue about trying to police our way out of it. I think there's a sense of social responsibility for residents of Tollington. The reason we've got drug dealers on a lot of street corners is because Tollington residents are taking drugs, and you kind of get a sense of like, oh, it's casual, it's something at the weekend or whatever. But I think we should try and engage our community with the reality of what it is they're doing when they're buying drugs from someone in the street. There is a terrible sort of spiral of criminality that our kids are getting dragged into, and it's for all those reasons that they're in deprived situations and they've been taken advantage of, they're being groomed. But somehow we got to try and share that responsibility, and I mean, it's probably a bit controversial to say, but why don't we get photos of people who are actually buying drugs off these drug dealers on the street corners? Why don't we actually start naming and shaming people who are contributing to what is incredibly damaging and antisocial activity, and don't just kind of excuse it?
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I'm going to move to Lois. Harvey, Lois, you have a question. Do you want to unmute?
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. I think it's been really, really interesting. I'd just like to ask about the elderly people and disabled people in the local area. There's a lot of elderly people in the area living on their own, in elderly care homes, homes for people with learning difficulties like Wray Court just behind the park. What do you think can be done to improve the area for them? And what would you do, and where would you do it?
It's me.
Sorry, Mick, yes to you first of all.
Yeah, I think elderly people, particularly those that are immobile, if you like, I think they, good sort of social care, linking health with social care is very important. I think in terms of the council have work with Islington Pensioners Forum on issues like that, and I think I think to increase, one main thing is that they don't feel isolated throughout life, and particularly in elderly life. And I think the to increase involvement of well, certainly the day centres. I know Sotheby Day Centre was controversial at the time, and that's been closed, although it's been, another centre has been used elsewhere. I don't think I think they're an important part of our society, really, pensioners, and I think they deserve respect for care. And as a councillor, I'd network with, well, not network's a real word, but I put up as a priority elderly people's needs.
Stopping the video.
Yeah. It's done for drink now.
Yeah.
I'm done for drink as well, actually, but I need something to eat. But
Can I pass that question on to Jane?
Yes, I think one of the disasters for our older and disabled people were the closure of lunch clubs Not everybody has a family member who can spend time with them. Not everybody can have a social worker spending a lot of time with them. Some people get 15 minutes of attention in the morning, 15 minutes attention at night. Money, again, as I was saying about young people, they have to make, obviously the council has to make budget choices, but I think those community arrangements need to be revived. I think it's absolutely essential. People thought they were dispensable. No, they're not. The other arrangements, I think we need to, again, it's about who are our residents. Is it possible to organize and to get people, rally people round to help their neighbours? In some areas, people will help their neighbours. They will go run errands for them, visit the chemist for them, feed their cat if necessary, and so on and so forth. But there's not enough of this. We don't know our neighbours. We don't know each other very well. So perhaps that is a forum that we could get going in Tollington to identify people who need help, to identify people who need a bit of company, to identify people who need help getting to our green spaces.
Thank you, Jane. Jonathan?
Yeah, I spoke earlier about using activating the community by using the WhatsApp groups and the mutual aid groups that have grown up. I think it's hugely important that we hold on to those and work with them to find ways of that they can continue to act in those informal community support ways. And I think people have really enjoyed kind of getting out and supporting their potentially elderly neighbours, and even some elderly neighbours have supported other elderly neighbours. So it's, you know, but it's about helping people to feel connected. I think the sense that the Wray Crescent, new Wray Crescent community hub, I'm not going to call it a sports pavilion anymore, a new community hub would be that kind of place. You just imagine someone would say, oh, I'm going to run a kitchen, we're going to make teas and coffees from 10 till 12, and it becomes a little informal drop-in. It doesn't need to be hugely funded, and it's about one of those things that keeps people and helps them to get out of their homes, keeps them active. And it's not just the elderly who need that. If you're living on your own, if you've got certain disabilities or whatever, it's really about what are those places, and it doesn't all have to be council organised and council funded. And really, to me, it's hugely important. We've got so many people with so many different skills, stuff to give. People have enjoyed it, and we should work out how to keep that activated and say that's something really special about our local area, is that we help each other.
Right, thank you, Jonathan. I'm going to ask one more question. There are loads and loads of them that have been emailed to me about the pavilion and the consultation, but we've already gone over the main key issues with that. So I'm going to go to Kaz. I don't know if Kaz Graham is still here. If she is, I've only got partial, I can only see some people on my screen. Kaz, is she there? No. Well, I will ask her question. It relates to traffic.
Sorry, I think it's a man.
His question, oh, really? Okay. His question, Kaz, relates to traffic. He asks, the traffic on Tollington Park has increased massively over the last 10 years. It only seems to be getting worse. As the sat-navs direct traffic past our homes to bypass Seven Sisters Road. I see what he means. What action would you push for to address this and make the roads and public spaces in Tollington safer, healthier, and less intimidating? And that's to you, Mick.
Well, the council, as we know, have been certain areas like Highbury East and West, and other areas, the low traffic neighbourhood schemes, and we'll probably be rolling that out. I mean, obviously it's got to go, it's going back to consultation, and I think there's probably scope. I mean, obviously with the council officers would have to be sort of monitored through the traffic department. How best we can sort of introduce low traffic neighbourhood scheme in the Tollington area.
Right.
You know, that'll probably be a way of calming traffic in Tollington Ward.
Okay, thank you. Jane?
Yes, well, this is an area I've been working on over the last year with Kaz, among others, and other neighbours like Alden. And after quite a lot of effort, finally, I think we might be beginning to see some progress. One of the positive things that happened recently was the monitoring of the traffic up and down Tollington Park. Obviously, that traffic can sometimes disperse onto the neighbouring streets. It also is clogging up Hornsey Road, which affects people on both sides of Hornsey Road. The only thing that concerns me is the length of time for the consultation period. Once the consultation period is complete, then there's a long period of planning and goodness knows what else in the council. I think my priority would be to try and shorten that period of time as much as possible, because in the meantime, people are choking on the pollution. The danger is there every time we have a school on Tollington Park, somebody's going to get run over sooner or later. Just lucky that it hasn't happened yet. And the noise is so appalling at night that people, even in the hottest weather, can't sleep with their windows open. Yeah. So we cannot bear another year of messing about, waiting to get something through that will finally take effect. I know the council is very sincerely now on a path to try and solve this. There's no question about that. So that I think the question will be to shorten the amount of time that the improvements come into effect.
All right. Thank you, Jane. Jonathan.
Yeah, so I've heard directly from Councillor Arena Champion, who's responsible for transport in Islington, that it's quite a long time before we're going to get a low traffic neighbourhood in Tollington, and I'm surprised that Mick's not had that same briefing. He does seem to be getting good briefing from his councillor colleagues, but on this one we are going to wait quite a long time. The council have introduced some of their other low traffic neighbourhoods with, I think, poor consultation, and as a result have had some quite serious backlash. It's also a complicated one in our area, because when you displace traffic, you put it in other places, and there's the traffic engineers are very concerned that they're just going to kind of mess it up for other people in the area. What I would say is that there are some things that can be done in the short term, some short-term traffic calming that can happen on Tollington Park. When you're driving from Stroud Green Road, you basically see this beautiful wide road ahead of you, and there's nothing that makes you want to turn down Fonthill, which is the way to go, which is the main route. And the council have taken the parking spaces away on both sides there, so there's not even the natural narrowing and slowing down of the traffic calming that you get from car parking spaces. So even to bring some car parking spaces, which doesn't take a lot of consultation, which can be done really quite quickly, or some other form of road narrowing, as we see on Tollington Way, further on down on the other side of Hornsey Road and on Marlborough Road and all over the place. Something like that could be done quickly. It doesn't take a lot of consultation to do that, and that would be a really good short-term solution. And while we're waiting for the low traffic neighbourhood to come around, but as Jane says, it could take quite a long time. When done properly, it is a long process, and it's a complicated thing. There's a lot of things to take into account, but we need something urgent, short-term measures, just to kind of like send people back down Fonthill Road and keep them off Tollington Park.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Johnny, that was the last logged question that I had. I don't know whether you wanted to open it to the rest of the meeting for a final thing, or you want to press on with other things now, but thank you everyone for your contribution.